The Athenian grain tax law presents one of the clearest examples of how ancient states sought to control not only the economy but the very sustenance of their citizens. Far beyond a simple fiscal measure, this law functioned as a mechanism of social and political stability, ensuring that Athens could feed its population, maintain civic order, and safeguard the power of its democratic institutions. Unlike modern taxation, which often aims primarily at revenue collection, the grain tax intertwined with issues of logistics, international trade, and the delicate balance between citizens' rights and state authority. In the 5th century BCE, Athens relied heavily on imported grain, particularly from the Black Sea region. Local production could not meet the dietary needs of the city's growing population, especially in times of war or poor harvests. The state, recognizing the strategic importance of food security, instituted laws that effectively centralized control over grain imports, storage, and distribution. The grain tax operated on multiple levels. It was a levy on imported grain, a licensing mechanism for merchants, and a regulatory framework ensuring that prices remained stable. By taxing grain and controlling its flow into the city, Athens could both fund public expenditures and prevent shortages that might spark social unrest. The law also reflects the intersection of legal authority and economic management in ancient Athens. Officials known as cytophylakes, or grain guardians, were tasked with monitoring shipments, collecting taxes, and maintaining public granaries. Their responsibilities extended beyond bookkeeping. They were enforcers of a system that could punish hoarding, smuggling, or price manipulation. In effect, the law institutionalized the state's role as a guarantor of survival, demonstrating a keen awareness that food scarcity could quickly translate into political instability. In a society where democratic participation required not just citizenship but the ability to live and work in the city, controlling the grain supply was a form of social regulation as well as a fiscal policy. One of the more intriguing aspects of the Athenian grain tax is its implicit recognition of market forces. While the law established fixed duties and taxes, it also allowed for flexibility in response to supply fluctuations. For instance, during years of surplus, the state could lower duties or permit private traders to retain more profits. During shortages, the state could requisition grain or distribute it directly to citizens. This adaptability suggests that the law was not purely punitive or extractive but was designed to stabilize both the economy and society. Legal scholars and historians argue that the grain tax exemplifies an early understanding of economic governance. Law was not just about abstract justice but about ensuring the practical functioning of the polis. The political dimension of the law cannot be understated. Athens' democratic system depended on active participation in civic life, from jury service to military obligations. A hungry citizen was a disengaged citizen. By legally securing the grain supply, Athens ensured that its populace remained physically capable of participating in civic duties, while also creating a system where the state's presence was felt in everyday life. It was a subtle form of control. The law did not command citizens' thoughts or loyalty directly, but it structured the conditions under which life could continue, reinforcing the legitimacy of political institutions. The enforcement of the grain tax also reveals tensions between public interest and private profit. Merchants who imported grain were essential to the city's survival but also held considerable leverage over the market. The law's strictures, tax obligations, licensing requirements, and penalties for infractions, functioned as mechanisms to balance these private interests against collective needs. Historical records indicate that smuggling and evasion were persistent problems, prompting periodic revisions of the law. These revisions demonstrate that legal frameworks in Athens were not static. They evolved in response to practical challenges, reflecting a dynamic interplay between regulation, economics, and citizen welfare. Another dimension worth noting is the law's role in foreign policy. Athens relied on a network of grain-producing regions, and the law indirectly affected diplomatic relations. By regulating grain imports, Athens could negotiate favorable terms with suppliers, ensure loyalty from allied states, and project economic power. The grain tax thus illustrates how domestic legal measures could have far-reaching international implications. A tax law in Athens was simultaneously an instrument of internal governance and a lever of geopolitical strategy. Interestingly, the Athenian grain tax law also contributed to early forms of public finance transparency. While not codified in the modern sense, records of taxation, shipments, and expenditures were often publicly posted, allowing citizens to see the administration of resources. This transparency reinforced trust in public officials and underscored the principle that legal authority was accountable to the people. In this sense, the law foreshadows modern concepts of fiscal responsibility and the social contract. Taxation and regulation were justified by the promise of public benefit, not merely the extraction of wealth. From a socio-legal perspective, the grain tax highlights the ways in which law intersects with everyday life. The regulation of food, essential, unavoidable, and universally needed, ensured that legal authority reached into the most intimate sphere of survival. Citizens' daily routines, market transactions, and even household management were shaped by the dictates of the law. In controlling what was arguably the most vital resource, the state exercised a form of power that was both pervasive and subtle, embedded in the rhythms of ordinary life rather than imposed solely through extraordinary coercion. In conclusion, the Athenian grain tax law demonstrates that ancient legal systems were sophisticated instruments for managing economic, social, and political realities. Far from being a narrow fiscal regulation, it functioned as a multi-layered mechanism for securing food, stabilizing society, and legitimizing civic institutions. Through administrative oversight, legal enforcement, and strategic adaptability, Athens ensured that the grain supply supported both the physical well-being of its citizens and the broader project of democratic governance. The law's significance extends beyond the practicalities of taxation. It reflects a society acutely aware that legal authority is most effective when it safeguards the essentials of life, intertwining the survival of the polis with the legitimacy of its institutions.